Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Okay. Well, I have been learning a lot of things at this new position that I'm in. And this new position gave me an opportunity this week. So we, as you know, we work with teenagers who are pregnant. And that goes for every race, every religion, every socio-economic situation, right? And in that, encompassing to get their schoolwork done, to look after their children, to fund them so that they can get to school and they have a place to live, so they can have their child care paid for, so they can be with their children, to teach them about healthy families, to teach about parenting. We have a dad's course, right? All those kinds of things. We also have workers that work with them because a lot of these people come out of situations. So they could be connected to people that were in a gang. There could be that their parents were alcoholics and abandoned them. Some of them are abandoned because they are pregnant, so now they're couch surfing, right? A little hard to go to school, have a baby, and couch surf, right? So because of this, what happens is all the people that work in this nonprofit organization, they do a lot of research and learning about how to be able to have trauma-informed care is what they talk about. So they've learned about trauma, and they are learning about how those traumas are there and people react because of past traumas. So as they are becoming more aware of this, they start to look into different things. So yesterday was called Diversity Day. And we were asked to come with an open mind because part of Diversity Day was to go to a mosque. So the first thing that you have to look at is, what do they mean by an open mind? So any situation that you're in on your job, right? So my job is, I'm very thankful for it. God put me there. I'm supposed to be there. So when you're walking with Yeshua, and the first commandment says, only have one God, right? Yeshua. What are you going to do about that when you're in a position and they tell you to be open-minded? What is their definition of open-minded, right? So they don't want people to go into it with a closed mind and with biases and stuff like that. Kind of interesting. So anyway, I read the thing and I rejected any open-mindedness to any other gods because I'm not open to that. And so we went to the Diversity Day, and interesting enough, it was in a Catholic church. And how close do you think the mosque was to the Catholic church?
Across the street.
Within walking distance, absolutely, about a block and a half. And yes, you would have been able to see, if you were high enough, the mosque from the Catholic Church. This, we know, is worldwide, right? So that was kind of interesting. Now, I was interested in, they told us we were going to go to the mosque and we can ask them whatever questions we want. And I was really interested to hear what their answers would be. And I was really interested to hear what the women and the men, there was a couple of men with us, were going to ask at the mosque. But of course, I didn't really know, I know enough from what we know and how to follow God, that there's going to be certain restrictions when we get to the mosque, and I didn't know exactly how that was going to play out. So we walked down, we're like 45 people, probably, are we? Yeah, probably. At least 45 people, maybe more. And maybe 50 or so. So we all walked down there, and as we're walking down there, I'm not even cluing in. Like, I'm not cluing in. I've done some research, and I realize every single woman has a scarf on. Right? And so I'm walking with these couple of young girls, and they go, well, Charlene, when you get to the mosque, you have to wear a scarf. And I said, oh, okay, well, and I was offered one. And I said, well, no, thank you. I said, I won't wear a scarf. I know what it means. And I said, the scarf means, I researched it, and the scarf means that you put yourself under Allah. And I said, I don't put myself under Allah. And they kind of looked, you know, because they're university educated, right? Open to everything. And I said, well, you know, the Holy Spirit had given me a word, the word authentic, because it's a word that they can relate to. The night before I got this word. And I said, well, you know, I truly believe that we need to be authentic of who we are. And they went, that's right. Like, yeah, okay, right? So anyway, we get down there and we're standing outside. And all these women start putting, oh, you gotta put your scarf on, you gotta put your scarf on. And I'm thinking, no, we're outside. That should only be when you go in to do prayers, right? But I know nothing about a mosque. And they all seem to know. So I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever, right? So one of the head ladies comes around and she says, oh, you have to put your scarf. And I said, no. And she goes, well, you have to wear a scarf. And I said, no. And she realized the no meant Charlene's not doing this. And I look around, it looks like every single person there has a scarf on except the two men. And the interesting thing is one of the men was all dressed in bright pink. And I think we have a couple of people, obviously, that are homosexual, right? And he's so funny. He's like, okay, here I go. But anyway, that was fine. And so we're standing outside, and of course, right away you can see people upset, right? Because you're not going along with this. If you don't go along with them, they think that all their biases come up in their head. They never asked me what I thought. They never asked me a question. But you can see the bias is raising up in them, right? Especially one of the ladies I work with who's new, who is pretty obviously she's Muslim. I didn't know at work, like you can't tell at work. So anyway, somebody comes up and says, well, no, you can go inside. You just have, if you go into the prayer part, you have to wear it. Well, yeah, okay, that makes sense. So she said, but we're going to meet in the foyer outside, and he's going to talk to us. I thought, okay, well, you know, I can go in for that kind of thing. Of course, the weather was beautiful, too. I could have tally-hoed as well and went somewhere else. But anyway, so we went in, and everyone's taking their shoes off. And as we're walking in, I noticed two other ladies didn't have any headscarf on. So I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. So we get in, and they're walking on the carpet. So when you walk in, there's a black carpet when you go into any business or anything, right, with the rubber underneath. And then there's all these squares that take your shoes off, take your shoes off, take your shoes off. And then there's all the place to put your shoes, like shoe racks, right, which makes sense. And anyway, the guy says, okay, you guys, you have to take your shoes off. You can't step on this carpet. So then people are having to move their shoes. They came out and very quickly moved those shoes. And so he said, okay, so do you guys know why you have to remove your shoes? He said, what did Moses say? Well, out of this 50 people, not one person says anything. Well, one person said something, which I thought was interesting. And he said, well, yes, because when Moses was with God, God said, take your shoes off. This is holy ground. So right away, I went, this isn't holy ground. God does not deem this place holy whatsoever. I can't take my shoes off now. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going very far. I got this carpet, right? Because if I take my shoes off, I'm saying that's holy ground, and that's my feet. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm now regulated to this carpet right here, which is quite a long space. So, and I'm finding this really interesting. And so anyway, he doesn't answer any questions. He just takes them right in. Well, of course, I can't go in. Can't take my shoes off. So I'm like, okay, so everyone leaves, and two ladies are left, those two ladies. And so I went up and I said, oh, you guys aren't going in, because I thought for sure I was the absolutely only person, right? And at this point, I'm like, okay, this is a really good test of faith of where you're going to stand. Because, I mean, all my life, I've always said no to all kinds of things. But, you feel that pressure. And I'm like, this is interesting. If I feel this, what's it like for somebody else, right? So I went up to them. One lady said, well, I'm atheist. And the other one said, well, that's not my Lord. And I went, okay, well, you kind of know where they're at, right? And they said, well, I don't like that they're pushing their religion on us. And I'm like, well, they're not pushing their religion on you. You're having a tour of a mosque to ask them questions so that you know how they think, or that your perception or biases on what that religion is may be skewed, or how you can help your participants and understand where they come from. So that was kind of a weird kind of comment. But anyway, we chatted, and I said, well, I can't go in because I said, do you know what the scarf means? And they said, no. And I said, well, that you're under Allah. You submit to Allah. And they're like, oh yeah, I'm really glad I didn't go in, kind of thing. Well, of course, they come out, right? And we're standing chatting. And this other man came. And so he goes, oh, you should go in. You have to go in. Like he was pushing me to go in, right? So I started the conversation with him and started telling him about our organization. And I asked him questions. And he can't get away because I'm just asking him questions. And I'm going to make sure that I just keep asking him questions so he can't tell me anything. And so then they come out. And the interesting part was all these people had to walk right by me. And I stood there and went into the other room. And they said, oh, go into the bathroom. It's a little different. It was the male bathroom. He goes, there's nobody in there. Just go in to see what it is, and I'll answer the question later. And of course, I can't go over there because I can't take my shoes off. So I'm like, oh, I really want to hear these questions, right? And so anyway, they went, and of course now I'm getting pressured because, oh, well, we're not in the prayer thing, but I still can't take my shoes off, so I can't go in there. So I start this conversation. I keep this conversation going with this guy, right? And I asked him about his wife being pregnant and how they viewed birth and women and community and all that stuff. And he gave me basic pat answers, or, basically what we know. He goes, well, Christians and Jews and Muslims, the old way of doing things, husband, wife, children, no sex before marriage. The community helps each other, just general answers, right? So anyway, then they were coming up reassuring me that I could go in because now this wasn't the prayer part. And I went, oh, I'm fine. No, I'm good. And I'm talking. So they go in there, and I'm like, oh, great. Now I can't hear the answers to the questions, and I can't hear the questions that the people ask. So I'm like, oh, well, I'll have to do more research. I'll have to ask them, what were your questions? What did you find out? Did you have an aha moment? Kind of thing. And we talked to the guy, and then one of the three of us, she went in then to hear the questions. And the other lady said, I'm not going in. And I said, oh, okay, well, let's leave. We'll go for a walk, right? Let's go back to the hall, and we'll see them when they come back, right? So we went, and we saw one of the houses built in 1904, and the lady was 75 years old, lived there for 75 years, and her granddad had built the house in 1904 in Edmonton, right? So we got some Edmonton history, and we're chatting. It was great. So everybody comes back, and I said, so what was your aha moment? What did you learn? What was something that you went, oh, I didn't know that, right? I didn't know that. Nobody could tell me. But the one thing that really came out that they really wanted to know was where women, the status of women. And the guy said, okay, I'm going to answer your question, but don't kill me and lynch me before I answer this question. Well, this guy is like 7 foot something. He is like huge. I'm thinking, and he said, this is a little intimidating because there's 45 whatever women, right? But anyway, he goes, so I'm going to answer your question. So basically he answered the question like how you would in the Bible, where basically how I actually asked the question of the guy outside, which was kind of funny because he was shorter than me. But anyway, so we're talking, and he said, well, basically the husband makes the money, and he's supposed to take care of his wife, right? And so the women came back and said, well, I really thought it was, here's the men, here's the women, and it was really cut and dry. It was really black and white, right? And but he said, no, they're supposed to look after their wife, and so yeah, okay, that's not too bad. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, you believe that, first of all, and secondly, it's not that black and white, right? So that was about all they could say. I was really quite disappointed. I'm hoping to get some more answers of other things that they kind of learned along the way. And so they get back, and I said, well, so that's all you got out of it, right? That was it. That's all they could get out of this whole visit, right? I would have been asking 3 million questions, man. And seeing what they said. So I started to think about it. And as I was asking, I asked 2 people the question, what did you learn? And they said, I learned that the religion doesn't say the men are better than the women, and yet they do. That was the answer I got. I'm like, okay. So then I started to think about it. And really, what it really boils down to is, how is it manifested? How is it, whether you're Christian, Islam, Jewish, or Muslim, Jewish, whatever you are, what do you see? What's the fruit on the tree? So I started to think about that, and I thought, well, first of all, they said the man's supposed to make the money and look after the wife. Well, money's just freaking status. Who gives a crap, right? They didn't say that they're supposed to love their wife, right? So you make the money, and she does all the work. Big freaking deal. Like, I don't care, right? Like, I started to think about this. It started going around my head. And then I went, okay, the Christian religion. Well, if we look at the Muslim religion, Islam, where does it come from? We all come from Abraham. He had 2 sons. One's one side, one's the other side, right? What does it say in the Bible? It says you are to love your wife, right? It doesn't say you're supposed to make money and look after her financially. It says you're supposed to love her, and you are supposed to love her that you would even die for her, as Jesus died for the church. And then I was thinking, I wonder how many women in the Christian faith would say their husband would be willing to die for them. Maybe he would want to kill them, but would they really want to say that he would die for them? And I thought, oh, okay. So that was interesting. So I started to think about that. And then the lady who runs the place when we get back then now has an opportunity to ask the Catholic priest a question. Well, he wasn't a priest. He worked for the Catholic Church. He was Catholic. He wasn't a priest. And he came in and talked. So then she puts her hand up. And she says, well, how does the Catholic Church deal? She goes, 50% of our population is indigenous and have effects of residential schools. How does the Catholic Church deal with this whole thing of what was done with the residential schools? So I meditated on that for a long time and went, that is a really dumb question. And most people would say, well, that's not a dumb question. Look what the priests did to those people, or those children. But that's a really dumb question. She just asked a question. The woman who wrote the note about being open-minded took a paintbrush and painted the Catholic Church and residential schools with one paintbrush. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, okay, this is weird. Why do I say that? Because not every Catholic priest goes out and sexually assaults people. Not everyone who's Catholic thinks that is a good idea. That is not the foundation when they teach about how to treat people in your family, right? And what to go out and do. So a lot of things that we think about, a lot of things that we put in a box and we paint with a brush, and that we make comments on, and that we say, even here, are way too broad. We are not focusing on really the attitude and everything behind it. We are putting people, situations, and events in a very shallow box. Okay? So, I'll come back to the Muslim Christian faith things, but let's go back. Residential schools. So, here's the situation. I know this lady named Penelope Day. She's called Pop Day. Her son was killed 2 years ago by a drunk driver who is Aboriginal. Pop is 80, I'll say she's 83-ish, okay? The driver who was drunk that killed her son, who was riding a bike, right? Because he worked out or lived at Whitefish. No, that's Montana. Where am I going? Ski Hill, by Vancouver,
White Rock.
White Rock. Or no, there's somewhere else. I'm not going to the right place. But anyway, he died riding a bike. So they get to the courtroom. They're there for 3 days. Pop is a really open person. Her children were taught to know about community. They accepted everybody was, they would talk to anybody, right? I grew up with her children. She talks to the mother of the Aboriginal guy who's on trial. That woman's 83. They sit down and they chat. And the entire history of that woman, that Aboriginal mom, is actually in the courtroom. They examine the fact that she was in residential schools as a result of why her son is an alcoholic who now killed Pop's son. And they're going to judge this case based on the fact that she went to residential school and that she has trauma from that. Totally get the trauma from the residential school, right? So her and Pop are sitting down and they're chatting for 3 days. Get to know each other. And the lady said, well, this is what it was like for me in residential school. Well, Pop says, well, I come from a very affluent, upper class English home. I went to the exact same school you went to, type of school that the British did, but it was elite where I was, and my parents had to pay for it, and you were sent to boarding school. And we had nuns and priests. And yeah, we slept on those beds, and yeah, we ate that kind of food, right? But that was considered elite. So now, she went there because her parents chose to put her there. In residential schools, that was not a choice. It was not done by free will. And maybe it was in some cases, but generally no. And they went to residential schools. So this Aboriginal mom and her are talking back and forth. The Aboriginal mom says to the courtroom and to the judge, you need to do something with my son. He's now killed 2 people. He already had killed somebody else, drunk driving, or had maimed them in some way before. She said, we can't get him to get help. We can't get the keys out of his hand. Yeah, I was in residential school. Yeah, I was an alcoholic. Yeah, my husband and I left with him when he was 2 at a really influential age. And I didn't know for 6 months till I came back, or however long it was, that my children actually had been abandoned and the people actually didn't look after them. And yeah, this is the situation, but now we can't keep him off the road and we can't take the keys away from him. You need to do something with him. In the end, what happened was he got a slap on the wrist. Pop's other sons were there at the trial. And her son stood up, looked at his mother and said, I have never been racist a day in my life, but I am now racist. Now, that was not a right comment, because really what he's saying is I'm frustrated with our legal system because our government is trying to fix a problem in a very incorrect way. Not on an individual basis, not on anything, but leniency because of what? Politics. It's not truth. It's not justice, right? So here I am with this group of people, this group of women, who think, oh, residential schools, and they paint it all with the same brush. Oh, it was horrible, and the Catholic Church did this and that and the other thing. Well, not every Catholic priest did that. And not everybody did those kinds of things. And was it happening in other countries, in other situations? Yeah, because every single person makes a choice. Not every Muslim is a terrorist. Right? Not every Christian walks in love. I mean, let's face it. What does it say? God said, in order for people to know who you are, you love one another. That's Christians, right? But we know there's groups that come against the Christians that say, well, we really don't have to do anything right now because they're all killing each other with our words, right? With condemnation, with accusations, with coming in agreement and cursing each other in the world of the Christians. So as I was thinking about this yesterday and talking to them, I said, every situation is going to be different. You take a person who has a mind, and they make choices. Now, if they are in the Islam faith, like if they're in the Muslim faith, if they're Muslim, they might make certain decisions based on certain things in what they believe that they are taught through their religion. But does that mean it's a clear reflection of what that religion teaches? Whether they teach you to kill people or not kill people or love people or not love people, doesn't mean that person is a clear reflection of what that teaching is. Same with the Christians. Exactly the same thing. Just because somebody's a Christian doesn't mean he loves his wife. Just because they're a Christian doesn't mean they don't fool around on their mate. Just because, right? So what I really learned from this was we need to not take groups, what their name is, and think that individuals are going to act a certain way because they're a part of a certain religion or group or anything whatsoever. If somebody says, oh, they're Mormon, you already have biases in your head of what a Mormon is. But have you had any friends that are Mormons? Right? I have friends that are all those things, Catholic, Mormon, all that kind of stuff, right? But their choices, who they are and what they do, you can't go, oh, well, yeah, the neighbor's Mormon, so they believe in polygamy. You can't say that. Well, you can, but it'd be really uneducated. Because we start painting everybody with a brush of the same thing, and then we start making decisions, in this case, with people that I work with, who actually influence other people's lives, where they're counseling them, where they're, trying to help them get out of all these pits that they're in, sometimes just saving their life. When they speak to these people, they need to be very, loving, not open-minded. They need to have a clearer view of who is this person, what choice does this person make, what traumas have been in this person's life. So, for instance, there's this lady I know who used to be in the Catholic faith when she grew up. As an adult, for many years, she went to an evangelical church. An evangelical church that taught her about forgiveness. How much they taught her, I have no idea, I didn't go. But generally, they teach about forgiveness. She did something that she could not forgive herself for. And I said to her, have you not been taught about forgiveness? She goes, yes, I have. But every time I spoke to her, she was doing penance. Knowing that her background was Catholic, you can now go to the person and say, are you doing penance? Because you know something about it. It doesn't mean she is. It doesn't mean lots of things, but it gives you a place to start to see where attitudes come from or teachings come from and how to help that person. And so she said, yes, I'm doing penance. And I said, well, that's something you learned as a child, but you rejected it, but you've accepted it into your heart. It's still there. And so she never got to the point of forgiving herself to this point yet. Still thought she had to do penance to the point where her husband would leave her. Well, she made it so rough that he did leave her. Then, it was maybe a year ago, she called me and said, "Oh, hi," and she just started talking and talking and talking, and she goes, "Yeah, and you know, now I'm trying to get my life back together, and my ex-husband," she said his name, but she goes, "My ex-husband, you know, oh, he went and fooled around with other women, and that's why I had to leave him." I'm like, no, that's not true. You were doing penance, so because you thought you had to do penance and lose your husband because you can forgive yourself over this situation. And now you're putting it back on him? No way. Not true. Right? So you see how we need to understand where people are coming from, but to know that not everyone is going to do what they're supposed to do or not do. Now, we'll go back to the thing about the Muslim faith, where they came out, the people said, well, you know what? It isn't men are above women. Well, but how does it play out? What do we see? Well, we can say that for the Christians too, and keep that in mind as we talk about this too, as we see it. Because when I went to a Muslim store to buy food, because it's clean food, there's no pork, so I go and I shop, right? All the men go in front of me and they get served first. And sometimes it would take me half an hour to get out of the store because they would butt in front. And the shopkeeper was very uneasy about the situation, but he never stopped them, right? And then I've told you this story before, that the day I got curious about the tree with Abraham and Jesus and Ishmael and stuff, and he wanted to read me the Quran and the chapter of Mary in the Quran, all of a sudden he told all the men, "No, busy, can't serve you." I got first choice that day, right? So then he read the Quran to me, right? So how many men walked in? Oh, 10, 15. And I was in there, like it was right where Elise danced, so I would go in there quite a bit, right? So there's an attitude, but there's an attitude with Christians, right? Where we're running each other down. And it says, how will they know that you're of Yeshua if you love one another? Right? So if the Christians are running each other down, they're not of Yeshua either. What are they actually practicing? What are they actually doing? What are they actually taking of the word and putting it inside them and actually living it? So we can't be throwing condemnation and accusation around at everybody and putting everybody in a box that, oh, well, if you're Muslim, you can't be my neighbor because, you know, you're going to kill me because you hate me because it says to kill Christians. Well, you know what? There's a lot of people in Germany when the Jews were killed that would have maybe said that they were Nazis and might not have killed a single solitary person and saved people that were Jewish. How do you know? Right? So we cannot label people and just do that. It gives you an idea. It gives you questions. It gives you a place where you can start asking questions and you can inquire on. But it's not something that you can just say, this person's this, so this is how they are. And if that's the case, you could look in the Bible and say, oh, God says all the people who love one another, if they love each other, they're part of Yeshua, right? And look at the Christian world and go, well, I guess they don't follow Yeshua, do they? Right? They could do the same thing. So all these kinds of things, whether it's government, whether it's religion, its beliefs, what they do, we need to be using a lot of wisdom and discernment about how we make decisions, where and what we do. And also where we go. I mean, now I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have went to the mosque. I would have got my van and went somewhere for a while. But at the same time, I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to go there and actually stand and practice the fact that I'm not going to give in to other people and their gods, right? So I'm very interested to hear what they have to say. I'm going to be asking some questions. Why do you think I didn't do that? What do you think I thought? I wonder if anyone will be honest with me. I just think you're a bigot. Okay. We'll see what they have to say. So it really, every single person has traumas, journeys. They've been taught things. We've been taught wrong things. We've been taught right things and all that kind of thing. But every single person, we need the wisdom of God to approach, to love, to use wise words with, to have boundaries with, all that kind of thing. And each and every situation and person is what we need to look at when we're with them. Don't put them in just a big old box and do it that way. So, I'm pretty much done. Do you guys have any questions? Or anything you want to say?
Whistler.
Thank you, Whistler. yes. His name's Kelly Blendon, and he did all the IT for the Winter Olympics at Whistler, and he lived there since he was 18, and started the bike club there, and made a really big hole in that community when he passed away. But anyway, yes, you were going to say something.
Yeah, the last time I traveled to the other side of the world, and I was in Africa, I went into Dubai. I remember telling everybody here about that journey.
Yeah.
And there, of course, it is an Arab-run country. There is Sharia law. There is Muslims are the upper echelon there.
Right.
And there is a real division, like you were explaining how when you were in the store, men are served first, and the women take a secondary role. And I noticed that there were many people there, Muslim, but they seemed almost embarrassed at how the law was causing the men to be put in front of the women, and the women a secondary role. So like you said, not everybody should be painted with the same brush.
Right, exactly, because everybody, yeah, exactly. And my friend of ours, she travels all over the world with her husband, and the last time that I met with her, I could not even ask her about her children. All she wanted to talk about was how she was really upset with how the Muslim men were treating the Muslim women everywhere she went. And of course, her husband goes off to work, and she stays at hotels and goes shopping and does all this stuff. And so she's there in the daytime, and she says, I see the women going by to work with the children. They take them to school. They cook, clean, take them to school, go to work, and walk back. And she goes, they walk past their husbands on the way to work, and they walk back past their husbands on the way after work. And she goes, I know what they do all day because I'm there, and I see it. And they don't move. And she goes, they just talk all day long. Now, she sees that in different countries, and it just really bugs her, right? And so, but that's her experience. That's where she was. But it's not going to be everybody's attitude, right? Our attitudes and where we're coming from, the traumas we've experienced, there's so many things that makes up a person, and we need to stick to what the Word of God is love. What is love? Patience, kindness, love, but it's wisdom, it's discernment, it's all being aware of what's going on and speaking out and standing your ground and staying where you're supposed to stay, because and listening to those commandments. Like when the guy said about Moses and the holy ground, well, it sounds all really nice and religious, and I want to ask somebody. I'm going to ask somebody at work about, what do you think when he said the Moses comment? Because, I mean, if anybody knows anything about Moses and who Moses God was and the Ten Commandments and the Sabbath, they would know the Muslims worship on any day of the week, or if they worship Sunday, or they worship any day of the week, and they're not keeping the Sabbath. Why are you quoting Moses? You're not following Moses. You don't even care what Moses had to say. So how can this be holy ground, right? So why would you quote that? It doesn't make sense, right? But people don't think that. They hear, oh, Moses, Abraham, Noah. This person must know what they're talking about. That's all you need. You just need to name drop, and people think you know the Bible. Wow. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of wedding feast or whatever, like, Jesus says, I never knew you. People will do miracles in the name of Jesus, do things, and if without love, without that turnover, without what we've been taught to do, how do you get to know Yeshua? How do you get to know him? And like he says, I never knew you. We got away with you, basically.
Okay, now that's a really good comment. I really like that. I'm going to be meditating on that because he said, I don't know you. Most religion and how people think of following any God has nothing to do with the word to know the person. To have a relationship, right? To so know them intimately and have an intimate relationship that you would not hurt them, you would uplift them, you would support them. That's a whole relationship that you're talking about. What other, even in the Christian religions, do they talk about actually having a relationship? Like really honestly. Most of it's, well, if you do this, then this happens. If you don't do this, this happens, right? Lightning bolts come down, right? I mean, we do have teenagers who, and lots of women have been through this. They get pregnant, and dad, who goes to church, says, don't come home because you're an embarrassment. Where does it say that in the Bible? Right? Where would Jesus say that? He would not say that, right? Because we know, he knew, it was a prostitute that helped him, but people go, oh, well, I go to church and I don't want your sin on me because what am I going to look like? That's not a relationship with Jesus. That's just religion. Right?
It's kind of funny, too, how, was it Jacob? He had that, I think, a daughter-in-law or whatever, and the son wouldn't give her a child or something. And anyway, she ended up sleeping with, I think it was Jacob, wasn't it? She ended up sleeping with a guy. I'm trying to remember the story, but she, when you brought a prostitute, she acted as a prostitute, but yet what she did to get an heir wasn't wrong in that.
And she had twins, didn't she?
That was. You're thinking Joseph's wife's daughter. I can't remember now. That was really good. We
got to get to know the family, don't we?
Yeah. I think of Jacob for some reason.
Talking about the cousin of the uncle of the aunt. Yeah.
The thing about knowing is so important. John 17:3 says, "This is eternal life, they may know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you've sent." It's all about knowing Him. That's all it is.
Absolutely, and being a reflection of that in everything that you do, right? Everything that you do. And that it doesn't come across as being judgmental to other people because of what you do doesn't make you better. You're a follower and you're there. Well, it says that we are to only love. We're to be a reflection of love, period, right? We're not here to change anybody. And if people see that love and they are called, then they know where to go, right? To get answers to whatever they need or freedom to whatever they need. But really, that's it. You're a light on the city, on the top of a hill like a city. So people know where to go to. So that's why when we speak about things, talk about things, whether it's in the news, in politics, anything, we need to really check what we're saying. And really understand this is an individual person thing when we talk to people. And don't worry about what they're wearing or maybe, not wearing nowadays. Yes.
I was just thinking, when you mentioned about changing people too, because people have forgotten their God, they've forgotten their identity, they don't know who they are. We have that the Jezebel spirit, the controlling spirit is becoming out. And if you have the media who's trying to form opinion, change opinion, trying to control the masses. That's that spirit at work there. And then you have the people who come in line with that, who, like, for example, who want communism to take over. They're trying to change people's ideology. They're trying to change the way they think. They're trying to manipulate.
Right.
There's no love walk in any of that.
No, exactly. And it really, honestly, it comes down to that loving kindness, right? It really comes down to love. And what is that? And of course, Satan has totally messed that up. You know, I mean, we know that from at work when you're talking to these girls and they come in, oh, but I love him. And, you know, well, he beat you up last week and he beat you up probably next week. And, you know, and how do you define love, right?
I would say, there's so many times that I want my friends to come to me and ask for help. But then when the stranger comes to me and asks for help, I want to hand them off to somebody else. It's
Right.
almost like I only want the people that I know or I want.
Who you're comfortable with.
But they're not the people that are going to ask for help.
No, probably not. Yeah, good point.
At one point I read here in the Bible that love is that you keep the commandments.
Right. Yeah.
And it says in Revelation 22:14, blessed are those who do his commandments. So basically, blessed are those who walk in love.
Yeah.
And those are the ones who have the right to the tree of life, that they may enter into the gates of the city. So if you don't know what love is, or have some weird paradigm of what you think of what love is, but you don't, then you start cutting yourself off from the tree of life, from eternal life.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's why when, you know, they said to be open-minded, they're really saying, go hither, whither, or whatever, you know, from one ditch to the other, whoever says whatever, you just go and take whatever they say and...
Open yourself up to that which isn't true.
Yeah, exactly. But because if they don't stand on anything, if they don't have anything they're willing to stand on, right? You know, was there one person in the group that went, okay, I totally don't agree with what those three people did, but you know what? They were willing to stand separate, which is hard to do. Was there one person that thought that? You know, really, I think the label bigot is pretty much that's what I'm getting, you know.
That thought went through my head too. If you
Bigot,
don't
yeah.
conform to what they want, what the majority want you to do,
Yeah.
then you must be some kind of bigot.
Yeah, some kind of bigot. But they're taking a brush and
Right.
putting it on there.
They're
Yeah.
guilty of the very same thing they're accusing you of doing.
Exactly, yeah.
Hypocrisy.
Interesting, isn't it? Yeah. But, yeah, so anyway, that's everything. And any other scriptures? Go ahead, Mark.
You stood your ground when you said, no, I'm not gonna do that. No, and they didn't make you try to do it. They respected your no, did they not?
They didn't respect it. They knew my no was no.
Yes.
They did not respect it. They know my no was no because she looked me in the eye.
But they didn't, it wasn't that they didn't respect your no.
Oh.
They didn't respect you. They
Okay,
have a right to say no.
right. So they didn't respect me.
Right, and that's laid out there.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, and they're not going to. And I knew they weren't going to because of what they said, to be open-minded. So I knew what they were going to think because they're willing to, they don't stand for anything, right? They're like grass in the wind, right? So there's no, they don't know what it's like. They don't have any value in it. They just go with whatever, right? So, and they're really lost in what they're doing too. They don't even know what they're doing or how to even come around to
It's their
that.
foundation in truth.
No, they're trying to act politically correct,
Yeah.
not morally correct.
Not in any truth
Not
or
in any
justice or
integrity,
anything.
No integrity, no justice.
No integrity,
Yeah.
no.
And so what they're doing is saying, we want you to be open-minded like us so that you will compromise everything.
Everything.
Yes.
Yeah. And when you don't compromise, then you're a bigot.
And Gerald mentioned the importance of not saying whatever. People say, oh, whatever. Well, by saying whatever like that, you open yourself to take whatever they say, take it, believe
Yeah.
anything.
Absolutely. Well, and then I start to think about it, and people would say, oh, well, why didn't you take your shoes off? You know it's not holy ground, you can still walk on it. But you see, that's for people who don't believe in a spirit world. And how many Christians don't believe in a spirit world? Lots. Lots of them. A lot of people that I know who are Catholic or of other faiths, people who say they have no faith, they believe in the spirit world. They've seen things move in their house. They've come over and said, Charlene, what do I do about this?
A wife of a long-time worldwide
Right.
Church of God pastor told me, don't talk to me about demons. I don't want to hear about demons.
Yeah, because you're scared of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, right? And so they've had things move in their house and their friends have had things move, and so then they come and they say, hey, I've had things, and I don't mind telling people that, because then they know if something happens or something moves in their house that they know did not have anyone move that, because they saw it go over there, right? Then at least they can ask questions and not feel isolated. They can at least feel free to say, hey, you know, I had something move in my house, because it's really isolating. Who do you go to if you grew up in a Christian family that doesn't believe there's a spirit world, and you know, your friends were playing with a Ouija board or whatever, and something does happen and it moves in your house? Who are you going to go to ask a question? You feel very isolated. And how do you get an answer? Right? And I did tell you about that young girl who had the Ouija board, and there was a poltergeist in the house and things like that. So the Ouija board just opened this girl up to about 4 years of trauma, because they had a Ouija board and things were happening and they didn't know what to do about it and why it was happening, and the anger was rising in the family. And it was all because they had a Ouija board. But until certain things happen to people, they don't, oh, well, that can't be, right? But when you know there's a spirit world and somebody claims something holy that isn't holy, you're not taking your shoes off. Because you know you're putting yourself in the line of fire, because the spirit world's more permanent and real than we are.
People are going to wake up to
Physical.
reality very soon now, because with the deep state being exposed and the criminals that ruled us are going to be exposed, they'll see the picture of Michelle Obama that came out with her beard. They'll say, this is not a conspiracy theory. You aren't weird. You aren't crazy. This is the truth. We see it now.
Yeah, well,
Reality.
and people will see it who want to see it, and people who don't still won't see it. And that's a reality we really need to know, because there are people that you can put somebody straight. Well, you've had situations, I'm sure, I know I do. It didn't come to my mind, but I felt it, like there's been situations where I put it straight in front of somebody, it's right in front of their face, and they still refuse. So there will be the people who
Yeah,
refuse.
it's like the last time when I was talking up there about what is truth.
Yes.
And that's that satanic doctrine of relativism, where people
Yes.
say, my truth is relative to my viewpoint on a certain situation, and that's it.
And that's it.
They don't, that's why when you tell someone like that God's word is the absolute truth, they'll just say, well, how can you say that? You know, what proof do you have that is the truth?
And to further what Jerry just said, and I was watching a YouTube video the other day, and this, you know, to give you a level of understanding where this compromisation has gone to, they were talking about how if people when people say something about someone, when they're talking about their identity, and you know, whether they're transgender or this and that, and the guy asked them, well, if everyone says you're a cow, are you a cow? Well, then yes, I am, he said, with a smug look on his face.
Yeah.
What kind of lunacy is that?
Stupidity.
Well, it goes outside of science,
You know?
because science does have a certain definition of what elements come together to make a cow, and if he doesn't have those elements,
Right?
it would be a little odd to call yourself a cow.
That's not an udder down there.
Yeah,
You know, like, it's just, things don't work.
Yeah, yeah.
Utterly ridiculous is what
Yeah.
it is.
well, exactly, and that's where it, yeah, but they'll just accept anything, right? And then there's just no integrity or anything with that, right? So all you know, for myself, it's interesting. We're going into Halloween, and of course everybody's already been talking about all their Halloween costumes, so that will be interesting as well. Yeah, and then Christmas. Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
It's interesting how this Halloween costume, people try to be something they're not.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. It's this transgender.
Well, and it's where it comes from, like with dressing up and things like that too. If you do the origins of certain things, right? So, I mean, Jeremiah, he likes to dress up as a king. Well, you know, that's fine. But where the day you're doing it on, what you're saying, what you're coming in agreement with, those kinds of things, when we know about the spirit world and the open doors, when we know that the holy days are holy and there is an anointing on that day, there's also days that have an open door for the negative too. And by doing certain things on those days, now you are coming in agreement with a whole spiritual world that you have no equipment to deal with, right? Most people don't. And they don't understand it. I think it's interesting too, the other thing I was thinking about with the Christians that don't believe that there's a spirit world, why do they put rest and peace on their tombstones? If the person's just dead, why do you put rest and peace?
When they're
The
not
Bible says
there.
rest and torment.
But if there's no spirit world, why do you put rest and peace?
That's
Maybe
true.
it's just a tradition that they follow. That
Yeah, but did they ever think of why they put rest and peace on there?
absolutely.
I think that's just so interesting. But rest and peace is so their soul's at peace, because there's a spirit world, right? And that's what Halloween's about, is bringing souls up from the dead. And so all that kind of thing. So it's really it was very interesting, to say the least. And it's not over. The journey's not over. It should be very, very interesting this next week. So, shalom.
Shalom.